Matalofatu, it's Tim Tafunga here. It's, what day is it? Thursday, 12th of November 2025. Now today I'm going to talk about the recent arrival of the Indonesian president and his state visit to Australia, visiting and talking to our Prime Minister. And more to the point is the defence treaty that's just been announced between Indonesia and Australia. It's not a new treaty. In fact, it's a reaffirmation of the Lombok Treaty of 2006, in which it is a military and criminal investigation and intelligence sharing treaty insofar as national security and counter-terrorism is concerned, in particular with regards to the past 2 decades of terrorist activity amongst the Jemaah Islamiyah, Islamic jihadist elements within Indonesia that culminated with the 2002 Bali bombings at Kuta in Denpasar, so as well as the Marriott Hotel terrorist bombings. So subsequent to that, the Australian ASIS and the Australian Federal Police had coordinated with the Indonesian police in order to establish a foothold of counter-terrorism networking between Australia and Indonesia in order to stop the Muklas and Amrozi terrorists within Indonesia. Now, subsequent to that 2002 terrorism activity, the Australian and Indonesian authorities, national security authorities as it were, and the agencies thereof, had coordinated a counter-terrorism network. Now, that was 2006. Recently, however, in 2025, the whole geopolitical situation has changed. The geo-economic situation has also changed. And with this change of outlook and regional relationships, we now have a economic brinkmanship in the sense that with BRICS, Indonesia has now joined BRICS, and it has changed the relationship between Australia and Indonesia since the Lombok Treaty of 2006. Now, we've had bilateral agreements regarding the military and even economic relationship between Indonesia and Australia that borders on inimical relationships. So insofar as inimicalism is concerned, as President Subianto had pointed out quite correctly, is that you can choose your friends, but you cannot choose your neighbours. Now that's a dire warning to Australia, because Indonesia is now a member of BRICS. And recently, as soon as Indonesia had signed that membership as the most powerful global South economic bloc known as BRICS, BRICS Plus, Indonesia has now joined Russia and China in the global South peak body. That's the peak body of the global South, BRICS, BRICS Plus. Now, how does that pertain to Australia's military AUKUS and Quad military alliances and their so-called spheres of influence in the region? It is adverse, because the FONOPS, or the freedom of navigational operations within the South China Sea, which would impinge upon BRICS shipping lanes within the South China Sea 9-dash line. Debatable whether it's 9-dash or 10-dash or 11-dash, as is mooted by the Chinese and national security analysts within the region. Nevertheless, the 2016 UNCLOS jurisdictional verdict over the arbitrational decision to give Philippines its jurisdictional maritime borders is actually ignored by the Chinese, and the Chinese ignore UNCLOS, or the United Nations maritime laws of the sea. Now, when that happens, there is a mismatch with international laws, or the laws as Western nations consider as the rule of law, as opposed to historical precedents set by China and its spheres of influence in the region. Now, returning back to Indonesia, the relationship, Indonesia has reaffirmed the Lombok Treaty during President Subianto's state visit to Australia. How does that impinge upon Australian regional influence? In two matters. Freedom of navigation operations within the South China Sea, impinging upon BRICS spheres of influence, such as the A2/AD area of denial by the Chinese. That includes the repeated incursions onto what Chinese consider as their exclusive A2/AD territorial spheres of influence, where P8 Poseidons by Australia would regularly fly into and be accosted by the Magpie swooping by the Chinese F-16s. You will have that repeated FONOPS incursion and interdiction by the Chinese within the region. How does that impinge upon South Pacific military alliances? Well, as a Samoan, we are not a party to any military alliances anywhere in the world, because specifically Samoa does not have a military branch of government. And in so doing, Samoa does not sign any military alliances for any nation. Now, that is different from Tonga, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, who have signed into the Pacific Alliance, which is a Pacific military alliance amongst governments of the Pacific nations. Now, Samoa isn't part of that, so we don't care. Now, insofar as the good neighbourly relationship between Samoa and China, with its geopolitical strategic objectives for the next decade or so, the Chinese Belt and Road initiatives will be spanning across the Pacific Ocean through to Central America and South America. Now, just recently, Venezuela and China have agreed upon a trading link with Central and South America, with Belt and Road initiatives, infrastructure development, as well as BRICS related economic trade, which means that shipping lanes will traverse the Pacific Ocean from China through the Pacific Ocean through a proposed Nicaragua canal onto the Caribbean Sea and onto Caracas and Venezuela, as well as Colombia. Now, the New World Order means that the Global South will set up their own universal parallel universe, whereby they would trade amongst themselves precluding and excluding Europe and the European Union, NATO, United States, and North America. When that happens, BRICS will be self-autonomous economically and geopolitically. Now, BRICS will also encompass Central and South America. The nations of Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Panama, and so forth will be interlinked with this BRICS peripheral network. The world order is changing. Europe becomes less relevant to the world. They are economically fragile compared to BRICS moving forward. Now, Australia, as President Subianto has pointed out quite correctly, you can choose your friends, but you cannot choose your neighbours. Australia is a European nation that should be smacked in the middle of the the North Sea in Europe, and it should not be where we are now, because the Anglo-centric government that we have, the Eurocentric governments that we have here in Australia, thinks that it is in Europe, and it is not right next door to Ukraine, where Australian military materials are being shipped to Ukraine, giving all of our valuable hardware, including the kitchen sink, all to Ukraine for all of our taxpayers spent on our Abrams tanks and our M777s that are all sent to Ukraine for their use at our expense. Now, we Samoans are a very droplet in the ocean insofar as geopolitical significance, but we do see what's going on. We're not blind. So, insofar as military alliances are concerned, we are not party to all military alliances. We cannot be accused of sedition as Samoans. We cannot be accused of treachery and defying the British Crown, because we are not part of the British Empire. We are part of Chogan as Samoans. We are not part of the British military infrastructure and networks, and we've all been precluded. We don't participate in Shoalwater Bay Talisman Sabre exercises. Samoans are not included in any RIMPAC military exercises. Samoa has no navy, has no soldiers, has no marines, has nothing. We have police officers who may be blue helmet police officers in the United Nations police force in global policing, but apart from that, Samoans are not involved in any form of military alliances, let alone the Five Eyes military intelligence sharing networks, as it were. But Samoans can have the freedom to travel visa-free to China. Okay? Chinese have scholarships offered to the Samoans. Likewise with Samoans in Israel. Israel is a party to bilateral relations between Samoa and Israel. Now, the Chinese don't like the Israelis at the moment. It's not the flavour of the month amongst the Chinese and BRICS member nations because of the influence of the Arab nations and the Muslim nations as members of BRICS. Apart from that, the Chinese would be just the same as the Israelis because they don't like Muslims as well, especially the Uyghurs in China, where Uyghurs are given the re-education schoolings and re-education processes within China, which has been considered as a form of concentration camp re-education, because the Chinese Muslims, albeit the Uyghurs, are subjected to numerous forms of authoritarianism and perceived draconianism, but that's a moot point. The Israelis are straight to the point. You know, you kill Israelis, they're just going to kick your ass, and that's what the Israelis have done. Even if the whole Middle East start peppering Israel with their missiles and hypersonic missiles, Israel will still be steadfast. And even though there's a peace deal at the moment, there's a ceasefire, Israelis are still peppering Gaza right at this very moment, because the Palestinian Hamas are still there, and they're still refusing to disarm. Even though they've surrendered all of the hostages, only a few dead hostages and their cadavers that have to be recovered. Apart from that, that's a whole lot different ball game entirely. Point is, Samoa has a good relationship with Israel. Samoa has good relations with China. And Samoa has an arm's length relationship with Indonesia, because they don't really interact that much. Firstly, Samoans are not Muslims. There may be a Sonny Bill Williams here and there, but he's very much a minority of the 90% of Christians of Samoans. There's about 20% Samoans who are Catholics. Most Samoans are Protestants. About over 60% of Samoans are Protestants, Christians, not Muslims. So we're different there. Samoans are different entirely. They play rugby. Indonesians play different sports. You know, that's just the way it is. And their culture's different, different languages. We just look the same. We're brown-skinned. We're probably descendants of Austronesians. Over 3,000 years ago, we were common people as Austronesian speakers, but that's about it. But apart from that, we're completely different, apart from the fact that we are all regionally brown-skinned people. And this is our side of the planet. As well as black people, as well as yellow-skinned Asiatics. That's the Oceania, South China Sea, and Oceania indigenous cultures. We're not Europeans, and Prabo Subianto is correct. We can choose our friends and even our families, but we can't choose our neighbours. So our neighbours are entirely different type people, different religion, different colour skin, different cultures. Europeans, lost Europeans who are lost in the South Pacific and have issues with acclimatising in Australia. That's their problem. But when it comes to international relations, they think they're in Europe. All right? They think King Charles is right next door. King Charles or Princess Anne is an Aussie donning on the Aussie slouch hat. But she's not Australian. She's just as Australian as any white guy coming from England into Australia and saying that they're Australians. No, you're not. Right? You don't belong here. All right? So, kako kaka Samoa, whiwhiloia kako io, kako lava kaka, ese kako kalakungunga, ele loko uma kako loko e kasi, ele loko kasi foi kako wa kaka Samoa, ingo sia kako, ingo sia foi isi kaka. Wait, I'm on the internet. So, ele loko ngu uma kako, ese uma kaka e makai foi kaka ia la ko lava ngu. Ya, lava ngekal ngoanga, ia soi fua, faz fua.